Hello everybody and welcome to the Football Philosophy channel, and this is about the Europa League draw. They've had the Champions League draw as well, and I'm going to do a little bit of a roundup of the weekend results in the Premier League and what's happening in the Premier League. But first of all, the Europa League draw has been drawn, it is out, and we have drawn Real Sociedad. The away leg first, which is going to be played on February the 18th. Real Sociedad are from San Sebastián in northern Spain. I've been there numerous times. It's an absolutely beautiful part of the world. I would love to go back there again. I'm praying that there's going to be fans in the stadium by then. It is just over 2 months away. A lot can happen in 2 months. If I'm honest, I'm not expecting it to be full stadiums, whether it was in England, or in Spain. But hopefully, there's been 2,000 fans in the stadiums in England, or some of the stadiums this weekend. Hopefully that can increase bit by bit. Even if it was maybe, I don't know how they'll do it. I don't know what the increments will be. But if it was perhaps half full by February, surely United would get some sort of allocation of tickets, and I'd love to actually go there. And anybody who's not been there who could go, I would recommend it. It really is a beautiful part of the world, San Sebastián, and I'm over the moon with the draw in that respect. On the football side of it, for United, I'm not so over the moon with it. I think Real Sociedad are possibly the toughest team we could have drawn. And don't forget, it was split into two halves, the draw, so I'm not saying necessarily that they're the best team in it at the minute, but they may well be. I mean, obviously we couldn't draw Leicester, we couldn't draw Spurs, we couldn't draw Arsenal, but from the teams that we could draw, I think Real Sociedad might be the toughest possible draw. They're actually top of the league at the moment in La Liga. It is tight. I mean, they're sort of a little bit lucky to be top. The Atletico Madrid are joint top. They got 26 points each. Sociedad are top on goals scored, but Atletico Madrid have got 2 games in hand on them. Real Madrid are 3 points back with 1 game in hand, so they'd be on 26 points as well if they won that game in hand. Barcelona appear to be well back. But they've also only played 11 games, Barcelona. They're on 17 points. If they could win their 2 games in hand, they'd only be 3 points behind. But they are, at the end of the day, Real Sociedad are top of the Liga, and that's the sort of teams that they're rubbing shoulders with. So that gives you one clue as to what what sort of a tough fixture or tough tie we've actually got. They've got David Silva playing for them on a fairly regular basis. Apparently Guillem Balaguer was on the TV only last week saying he can't believe City have let him go. He's 36, David Silva. I think in England maybe we look at players' age a little bit more than they do on the continent. David Silva's playing regularly for Real Sociedad. Maybe it's not a coincidence that they're right up there with the big boys this season. With David Silva pulling the strings. Guillem Balaguer was saying he still thinks he's one of the best players in the world. Yes, obviously City have let him go. The way City played at Old Trafford the other day, possibly it would have been a bonus for him, that type of player that can open up find little pockets of space and open up the opposition defence. So maybe City are missing David Silva a bit, even if they were using him as a sub. When I speak about the ages of players and the way we look at it in England, I think we look at it differently in England compared to what they do on the continent. And City were already, underusing David Silva. He was substitute most of the time and getting the odd game, and maybe they should have been using him more often. Who am I to question Pep Guardiola? But that's what I think. And obviously Guillem Balaguer seems to think that David Silva's as good as anyone around, and obviously he was. So, I don't think you could argue that he wasn't one of the best players in the world when he was 30 or 32, perhaps. So there might not be a hell of a lot of a difference. I think he's 36 now. Brings me to 1 or 2 United players that I like. Juan Mata's only 32. Nemanja Matic, I think he's only 32. I don't think they get enough game time. A lot of the fans think that they're too old. I don't think they're too old. I think they're top quality players who've always used the brain. They know where to be on the football field, and they've got good control of the ball and good awareness of what's around them, and I think we need players like that playing more often. And I think if Juan Mata and Nemanja Matic were playing on the continent for another team in, say, Spain or Italy, I think they'd be playing virtually all the time. I'm sure there'll be one or two people in the comments might say that's because it's a slower game over there. I'm not wearing that. You know, the top teams in Spain and Italy are equally capable of knocking out the English teams just as it is the other way around. We don't do so well against Sevilla, for example, do we? Whenever we play them, we certainly didn't last year. So I don't think that argument holds water. Football's football, and the teams in Italy and Spain, I think they're pretty similar to the teams in England. Obviously, we've got two great teams, Liverpool and City. City are not so great right now, but it wouldn't surprise you if one of them went on to win the Champions League. But if you look down through the whole of each division, I think most of the teams match up. I think the bottom teams in Serie A, all La Liga, are probably similar to the bottom teams in the English league. So that's my feelings on the older players, but they're not so old, not compared to David Silva. They're not, and I think we underuse them. And certainly Real Sociedad are using David Silva a lot, and that might be one of the reasons that they're right up at the top. And we're going to have a real tough game against them. It's one to look forward to, but I won't like to guess who's going to go through. It really will be that tough. So, you know, if they knock us out, it's one way of getting back in the Champions League that'll be already out of our hands, so to speak. Elsewhere in the Champions League, Tottenham have drawn Wolfsberger. That's the Austrian Wolfsberger. Don't mix them up with a team called Wolfsburg from Germany. So Tottenham have drawn Wolfsberger. Arsenal have drawn Benfica. That could be an interesting game, Arsenal and Benfica. They all seem to be away. The English team seems to be away first. Leicester have drawn Slavia Prague. I would fancy Leicester to get through that. And also Glasgow Rangers are still in it. Glasgow Rangers have drawn Royal Antwerp from Belgium. So I think that could be an interesting tie. Those fixtures are due to be played. As I say, I think all the English and Rangers as well, by the way, I think they're all away first. So United should be playing on February the 18th in Spain, with the second leg on February the 25th at Old Trafford. So it's a way off. It's just over 2 months off. Hopefully there's a decent sized crowd allowed both in Spain and at Old Trafford for those games. So that's that for now. Obviously, I'm not going to go through all that. There's 32 teams. There's 32 teams in that Europa League still. That's the last 32. So there's 16 fixtures in that tournament. They've had the Champions League draw as well. Tongue in cheek, I predicted last week that Manchester City would draw Borussia Mönchengladbach, and they have. For me, Borussia Mönchengladbach are the team. You know, I don't know a hell of a lot about them, but when I look at the other teams that are still in it, I think if you was to choose who you would want to draw, you probably want to draw Borussia Mönchengladbach. For example, Chelsea have drawn Atletico Madrid. That's going to be a really exciting game, an exciting tie. And Liverpool have drawn our nemesis. Liverpool have drawn Leipzig. So that will also be an interesting game. I don't think Liverpool will have it all their own way. I do think if they've got most of the players fit, Liverpool, they're having a few injury problems at the minute. I do think Liverpool have got a good chance of getting through, but it will be a tough game for them. It'll be an exciting game, exciting tie, I should say. Sevilla, who are still in the Champions League, a lot of people when we drew Sevilla in the Europa League last year, people thought we were going to beat them fairly comfortably. They're still in the Champions League. They've drawn Dortmund, so that'll be an interesting tie. And then the other team in our groups that were in our group in the Champions League this year, PSG, they've drawn Barcelona. So I don't know if you can look at it like that, but obviously PSG have drawn Barcelona, so that could have been us. Although Leipzig have drawn Liverpool, that couldn't be us because obviously we couldn't draw Liverpool in that particular round. So that's the Champions League result. Champions League draw. In the Premier League this weekend, a lot of people were sort of up in arms, if you like, about United's performance and the way they played so defensively. I wasn't disappointed with it. I was quite pleased with the way we played at the weekend. We needed to get We needed to get at least a point, and we could easily have nicked it. That's how it works when you play like that. Okay, we didn't nick it, but we got the point we needed. And it's already been put into perspective within 24 hours. When you look at the results in the Premier League since then, Spurs dropped points at Crystal Palace. I said yesterday morning before that game on Twitter, I put a thing out there saying it's going to be a tricky tie for Spurs. That a tricky game. It was a tricky game, and Palace equalised. They were 1-0 up Spurs. Palace equalised with about 10 minutes to go and had another chance to win it after that. But that finished 1-1. Liverpool at Fulham, that did shock me. Fulham seems to be just turning it round. I didn't see the game. I didn't see the game in its entirety. I did manage to watch the second half. I didn't just switch it on at half time because Fulham were leading 1-0, by the way. I just, time constraints with what I was doing myself yesterday. But I managed to watch the second half of that game. From all reports, Fulham were the better team and had 2 or 3 really good chances in the first half. I've not seen the first half, but the second half I watched that, and that was as I would expect the game to be. Liverpool were basically all over them. But Fulham sat back with a bank of 4 and a bank of 5 and just one up top. A real good team shape, real defensive teamwork. They look really, really good, Fulham, defensively. And they were a little bit unlucky to have a penalty given against them. A free kick by a Liverpool player went into the wall. The lad had jumped up. He did have his arm out. I just think, when I say unlucky, I think under today's rules, VAR had to give it. If that would have been pre-VAR, though, I think it would have just been waved away. But that's that. We have got VAR these days, and Fulham could have had a penalty of their own in the first half. I've watched that back. I'm not convinced it should have been a penalty. But there's a lot of talk about that, whether it should have been a penalty. I've got a different outlook to most people on the importance of decisions in games. That penalty that Fulham could have got was before Fulham had scored. So it was 0-0 at the time, and Fulham still went ahead. Now, look, it'd be ridiculous of me to suggest that if you could have that penalty and if you could turn the clock back, that you wouldn't take that penalty or have that penalty given to you. Of course you would. You want as many decisions like that to go your way as possible. But if you get a penalty refused to you and then still take the lead, I'm not too sure that it necessarily means... Obviously, you've been hard done by, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the game would have gone differently. Just because you've got that penalty, well, first of all, you've got to score it anyway. But if you do score it, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get that other goal that you get later in the game. Goals change games. Liverpool would change their mentality, perhaps, if they fell a goal behind. Goals change games, not necessarily in a positive manner. It can change it in so many different ways. And we'll never know now. If the other thing as well, you are better. If you think about it, if you're an underdog, in an ideal world, if you're going to take the lead against a really, really top team, you want to take the lead in the 90th minute if you can, or even in injury time. That'd be fantastic. They've got no time to equalise. So I think that penalty decision was in the 16th minute. Now, you might say, well, it's not a great deal of difference, and it isn't a great deal of difference, but it is a difference. They ended up taking the lead in the 26th minute, I think, so it's 10 minutes later. If they'd have got that penalty and scored it, we'll never know now, but if they'd have got that penalty and scored it, they might have ended up losing that game. Liverpool have got more time knowing that they've got to get back into the game. So as much as you would take it, of course, I'm not being ridiculous, of course you'd say, if we can have that penalty, we'll have it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that Fulham would have gone on to win the game. It doesn't necessarily mean that Fulham would have gone 2-0 up either. It doesn't. So it's just an interesting way that I look at the game. Well, I think it's interesting anyway. So that was Fulham and Liverpool. It finished 1-1. What's happened to Arsenal, by the way? Lost 1-0 at home to Burnley. Granit Xhaka got sent off in that game, which made it, give Burnley a better chance. I didn't see the game again, but you expect Burnley to be able to defend well, defend deep, but they're not having a good season themselves. But I think it was 0-0 when Xhaka got sent off, and that gave Burnley an extra oomph, if you like, and they ended up getting a winner. Arsenal, when they played at Old Trafford, I wasn't surprised how well they played. I wasn't surprised that they beat us. When Arteta took over, they beat Liverpool in the league last season, towards the end of the season. They beat Man City in the FA Cup semi-final. They beat Chelsea in the final. I think it went to pens, but they beat Liverpool in the Charity Shield. And I really, really thought Arteta had turned Arsenal around. What a funny old game football is. I'm absolutely shocked at what's happened to Arsenal, and I think that they're languishing about 15th in the table at the minute, and they can hardly score a goal, and like I say, they can't win a game. So I'm stunned with what's happened to them, and I just don't understand it, to be honest. Leicester beat Brighton 3-0. I noticed Jamie Vardy got 1 goal and 2 assists against his name yesterday. What a player he's been for Leicester over the years. And the other, have I said that? I said Spurs. Obviously, United and City drew 0-0. Liverpool drew at Fulham. Yes, that's what I was going to mention. None of the big 6 won. United drew with City. Liverpool drew at Fulham. There is one I've not mentioned. Spurs drew at Palace. Arsenal lost to Burnley. The one I've not mentioned was the previous day. That's why I missed that one. Great result for Everton. 1-0 against Chelsea. Just skipping back to what I was talking about. None of the big 6 won. I'd love to know when the last Premier League weekend with a full fixture list where none of the big 6 won their game. It must be a long, long time ago, if it's ever happened at all. It's not often. It doesn't happen that often that Liverpool or City don't win in the same weekend, let alone all of the big 6. But Everton's game against Chelsea, what a job Ancelotti did there on that day. Everton had problems in the fullback areas. Luca Dina was injured, or he is injured, and Coleman was injured. And they had to go with a back 4 that included, and they only played a back 4, by the way. They didn't play a back 5. Maybe they didn't have the manpower to play a back 5, perhaps. But a back 4 made up of all centre-backs. They had Holgate at right back, and they had the lad that they've signed from Norwich, Godfrey. He was at left back. And Keane and Yerry Mina were the 2 centre-backs. Then they had 3 in midfield, and they had Iwobi and Richarlison tracking back, making up a 5-man midfield. Those 2 lads playing on the width with just Calvert-Lewin up front. It was a tremendous job that they did on Chelsea, and he really got them well organised, Ancelotti. So that was a fantastic win. But Chelsea, as I say, the 6th team of the big 6 this weekend. They actually played Saturday, and they got beat 1-0. Great win for Aston Villa as well. What a job he's doing there. 1-0 away at Wolves, because that's not an easy fixture either. Wolves away, so that was well done to them. In the table, I noticed a couple of other things that I wanted to mention as well. United very recently have won 3-2 at Southampton after being 2-0 down, and 3-1 at West Ham after being 1-0 down at half time. I quite often see teams that are doing well and suddenly they have a defeat, and then they nosedive. But I think Ralph Hasenhüttl at Southampton and David Moyes at West Ham I think they're both doing fantastic jobs. Both of them have gone back above United in the table, by the way. Obviously, we played City, so it's a proper tough game we had at the weekend. But Southampton, since we beat them, like I say, you often think that they might have a bit of a slump once they lose a game. Okay, they may have been a little bit lucky with the fixtures, but no fixture in the Premier League can be counted as easy. It's not a given that you're going to win these games. But since we beat Southampton, they've beat Sheffield United 3-0, and they've beaten Brighton 2-1, and then West Ham had a fairly tricky fixture on Friday night. They played and they won 2-1 at Leeds. So both West Ham and Southampton, for the time being, I hope it's only for the time being, have gone above us into. In fact, West Ham are in 6th, and Southampton are in 5th. Tottenham and Liverpool obviously top with 25 points each. Leicester 24 points, Southampton 23 points, Chelsea 22 points. It's really tight at the top. We're on 20 points, but we've got a game in hand on all of those teams, so we could get onto 20. And obviously, it'd be a long time before that game's played. Don't know how we can fit the game in against Burnley, but both us and City would be right up there. They've got a game in hand as well, because they didn't play on the first day against Aston Villa. So it's so tight up there, it's unbelievable. And on Wednesday night, we play obviously Thursday against Sheffield United. On Wednesday night, Spurs are away to Liverpool. if that game happens to end up in a draw, which wouldn't surprise me one little bit, it'd just be an unbelievable top of the table, because surely most of those other teams are going to pick up some more points between them. Well, maybe even all of them will during the midweek fixtures. So if that game's a draw, the top of the table will be a sight to behold. It'll be absolutely packed in them top 5 or 6 positions. That's that. I'm looking forward to that game. I'll be back later with the rating show from the Man United Man City derby. If you enjoyed that little show, please subscribe. Please tell all your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, don't tell anyone. Keep stum.